There's also this societal grooming as well that tells boys that if you're pursued by an older woman, you're the king of the world, you're killing it. And that myth played into, the reason that my abuse carried on for as long as it did. My daughter was born when I was 15, and then I was still silent about what happened for 3 years after that, so when I was 19. And that's when my stepmother decided to flee the country. The one thing that kills conversation and healing in community is that comparison of trauma. So much of what I experienced could have been prevented if the adults in my life didn't feed into their shame. I came to the understanding that what happened to me was not my fault in any way, shape or form, but it is my responsibility to do something with it.
Thank you for coming, Harrison.
Thank you for having me, Osher.
Are you well?
I am. I'm very well, actually. It's a really good time in my life.
I'm glad to hear that. You are this is your old neighbourhood?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, I'm in my old stomping ground where I was raised.
Wow. We are in the eastern parts of Sydney, the Bronte kind of Coogee, Clovelly area, the not Bondi part.
Not Bondi part, yeah. We're out. We burst out of the world of Bondi. It's its own universe.
Once you do, you're like, oh wow, this is actually it's quite lovely.
Yeah.
When you're not in that. I was in Bondi the other night at a restaurant around the corner from my old apartment.
Yeah.
It's like, holy smokes, man.
Yeah.
Like none of my neighbours could afford to live here now.
Yeah, I know. It's just out of question. I mean, my grandparents raised five kids, my mother and my aunties, in Hastings Parade in Bondi. And it's now been split up into a semi sort of like apartment type thing now. It's crazy to go back there, but I do feel at home there. Like I do have a legitimate connection to it, and it's always nice to go back.
Yeah. The book, I wanted you to come in here because the book is very much about what I've always found to be the pathway out of shittiness.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I could see this thing happening to me, or I could see this thing happening for me.
Yeah.
It's happened anyway, or it is happening anyway.
Yeah.
What am I going to do with it? It's easy to write it. It's easy to say for me right now.
Yeah.
It's easy to say this is going to be the title of your book. Initially, very, very hard
It is.
to come to that point.
It is.
But it is a barrier through which once you break through, life is very different. When you said, oh, this is my old neighborhood upstairs, this is my childhood home, my first thought was like, oh shit, the home I read about? Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
Well, no, not the home you read about.
Okay, right.
The home that you read about was in Coogee, so a couple suburbs away.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's easy to say, transform your pain into purpose. It sounds like an inspiring thing. But behind all that, as you would know with your own sort of lived experience around this, there's a lot of hard work behind that.
Yeah.
And it's not just getting to a point where you can be reflective for the sake of being reflective. You've got to, drum through a lot of shit to get there.
Yeah.
And, the fact of the matter is when I was presented with the opportunity to write a book and talk about the sexual abuse I endured as a child and then turning that into an advocacy campaign and changing legislation around the country, I leapt at it because I wanted to write the book that I wish I had from the beginning of advocacy when I first started speaking out. And I wanted to pass that sort of the nuggets of information, and I don't like saying wisdom like I'm self-entitled to saying that, but there is a sense of wisdom to it.
Yeah.
And passing that forward so, other people can use their adversity no matter what it is, if it's mental health or child sexual abuse or anything that they've had to overcome, and turning it into a purpose which is totally definable to them. For me, it was pursuing law reform. Yeah. For someone else, it can just be rebuilding a connection with their mother that they haven't spoken to in a few years. It's totally definable up to the individual.
When people think child sexual abuse in Australia, there's a great misconception about what it is. Yes. And the myth is that it's stranger danger when the unknown adults or strangers account for just 4.9% of child sexual abuse. Overwhelmingly, 80% of child sexual abuse in Australia are people who are either family or known to the child or trusted people that the family trusts. And I understand why we don't talk about it because it is the most uncomfortable conversation that we could have in our community. But if we're all about protecting the children, as so many people want to get your votes, they are saying, well, think of the children, it's something we have to talk about. And also when people think child sexual abuse, they see both boys and girls as the victims, but always men as the perpetrator.
Yes.
Your story is different to that, which I think may be why it somehow cuts through a bit. If, for whatever you were able to, could you perhaps tell a bit of your story and how you came to here?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. 80% of child sexual abuse is perpetrated by someone known to the victim. And that was what happened in my case. I was sexually abused by my stepmother from the ages of 13 to 16. And that, started off with, my parents splitting up, my biological mother and my father going through a divorce. And then I felt as though, I was in no man's land and I had to pick a side because the divorce was quite volatile. So I chose to live with my father at 13. That's when my stepmother came into the picture. And just gradually, bit by bit, the erosion of boundaries were introduced. And yeah, I think you're right. When we talk about child sexual abuse, we tend to go to the most dramatized Netflix documentary, like totally...
Yeah, it's a man in a van. It's a bloke with lollies in his pocket. It's someone in a
stereotype.
A video game chat that's asking them to send photos.
Yeah. And that does happen, but it's not the vast majority of how these things are perpetrated. And the gradual erosion of boundaries with my stepmother eventually led to sexual abuse on a daily basis before and after school from the ages of 13 to 16. And when I was 15, she fell pregnant to my daughter, who I had to pretend was my half-sister to avoid being subjected to further abuse from not only my stepmother, but my father, who was physically violent as well throughout my childhood.
So the erosion of boundaries that you were describing there, it's important to say that because sometimes, and unfortunately in some words, we use when we shouldn't use them, and it erases or diminishes the importance of these words. Like that is grooming.
Yes.
Grooming behavior.
Yes.
To slowly and subtly psychologically shift the child's permissions and think and shift the normality. You're brainwashing.
And it's also a test. You're testing the boundaries, or what's overstepping, or how can I just get that little inch closer? Yeah. Yeah, to get to, perpetrating what they want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I've been a teenage boy.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And a light breeze in the wrong direction will signal my body to just respond like I'm ready to go. And now I'm like, I don't want to stand up on the bus.
Yeah.
All right. So there is some amount of psychological manipulation that has to happen as well for sexual abuse to happen when a boy is involved.
Yeah, totally.
So could you describe it, if you could you describe what was going on for you and how strange your view of the world had become?
Well, I don't like to explain it like this, or I'm hesitant to explain it as a relationship, but I use that terminology not to... It was abuse, but
you'd been convinced that you were in. You had been convinced you were in a relationship.
Yeah, and I think I use that term, again, not to diminish the abuse, but to relay to listeners and people who hear my story the dynamic that was at play at the time, because that's what it was like. Yeah. It was... I thought that I was having an illicit affair with my stepmother behind my father's back. And we had to keep this secret because if I said anything, we'd both go to jail. I'd put the woman I love in jeopardy, in harm's way, and eventually my daughter in harm's way. And that was just the mindset. And I think when you're a 13-year-old boy who is pubescent and, gets aroused by that. And there's also this societal grooming as well that tells boys that if you're pursued by an older woman, you're the king of the world, you're killing it. And that myth played into, the reason that my abuse carried on for as long as it did. And it evolved to daily sexual abuse. But I as a 13-year-old boy, I didn't have the language to explain that it was abuse. Because I was a literal child, I could only explain it in simplistic terms, which was, I'm in a relationship. And I knew something was wrong, but my explanation for that was because we were doing it behind my dad's back.
Right.
It wasn't that, it was, this perpetrator or this pedophile.
Yeah.
I didn't even think that I thought a pedophile was someone who did it to little kids, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even have the language to explain all of this,
Hearing you say that, it really begs the question as to what the fuck is going on in mainstream porn with the stepmother fantasy? When you see the stepmother fantasy,
or teen as well,
all through the porn world, What does it make you think when you see that?
Well, it's sort of like a piss take of the abuse that I experienced, and also of what many male victim survivors have experienced as well, because unfortunately, this is a very common thing. And you were talking about, it being one of the hardest conversations to engage with. Child sexual abuse, understandably, is because when it's happening at 80% with people that we know, it is so hard to come to terms with the fact that someone you've spent Christmas dinners with and, birthdays and anniversaries with is capable of committing that.
Yeah.
And perpetrators play off that because they know that the shame not only belongs to the victim, what keeps them silent, but the shame is everyone around that victim as well, the support network, to keep them at arm's length so they can continue to perpetrate the crime. And the fact of the matter is, pornography, it's groomed boys in a way, a societal grooming, to think that any sexual advance is the highest form of social currency for them. And in the book, I speak about the whole Bonnie Blue thing. And when she came, she's the UK porn star who came from overseas and wanted to prey on the barely legal 18-year-old boys at schoolies. And whilst, they're over 18, it is perfectly legal, but they're coming from a place of that societal grooming. And then when I spoke out against Bonnie Blue, that was the point that I was trying to raise. So I just use that as an example to talk about how boys in society reach that point where they feel as though any sexual advance is awesome. Yeah.
The idea that a sexual advance at the age of 18 from someone who has enormous authority or power over me was a bad thing. I was like, are you kidding?
Yeah. It's a very common response with my story to say if the roles were reversed, if this was a 14-year-old girl or 13-year-old girl and a stepfather, he'd be struck out immediately and thrown in jail. But more often than not, that's not the case at all. Perpetrators who are men and prey amongst young girls, they prey on the fact that, or they push the narrative that she was asking for it. But for me, I put it onto my stepmother. So really, the question is about victim and perpetrator. Who do we believe? Who do we place the belief in? And I think we, as a society, we need to change that mindset. And when we're unsure about something and we feel that gut feeling, oh, this is a bit uncomfortable for me, act on that rather than feed into it and turn a blind eye, because so many victims, girls and boys, have been left to fend for themselves for years and years and years because the adults in their lives were scared to say something.
When did you start to realise that this might not have been I'm king of the world, I'm awesome? Yeah. When did you start to feel the wheels coming off a bit? Yeah,
well, the sexual abuse persisted for 3 years. My daughter was born when I was 15, so between that. And then the sexual abuse ceased on my 16th birthday. That's when the last act of it took place. And then I was still silent about what happened for 3 years after that, so when I was 19. And that's when my stepmother decided to flee the country and go back to the Philippines, her homeland. And she took my daughter with her. And so I got a call from my biological father saying that there's been some strange bank transactions on his card and my stepmother wasn't answering her phone. Can you go check on her and the baby? And I was living around the corner in my own apartment. At this point, I was 19 years old. And I went to the apartment in Coogee, which is in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, for listeners at home. And the drawers were bare. No one was home. Cupboards were all emptied and everything. And lo and behold, we found out she'd gone to the Philippines. And my father operates like a bull to a red rag, right? And my stepmother knew this. So to sort of throw his focus off her leaving the country, she put it on me and sent my father an email falsely accusing me of raping her. And that is when my father forwarded me and my biological mother the email. And then my mother picked me up and said, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And I sat in the passenger seat of the car looking straight ahead at the road and told her that I had a relationship with my stepmother and my little sister might actually be my daughter. Didn't even have the words or the language to comprehend that it was abuse. I said to my mum I was in a relationship.
How are you handling these are big emotions. Did you have mates around? How are you handling things?
No, I completely isolated myself, Osher, because if I didn't go to house parties. I didn't have that coming of age story that most teenagers do, where you go to house parties and, experiment with alcohol and maybe smoke a spliff or something like that. That wasn't the reality for me, because I knew that if I let the guard down even a little bit, someone might see that something's up and I might jeopardize the safety of who I thought was the woman I loved and the mother of my child and my child as well. So I took that on as a 13, 14, 15-year-old boy, and I just didn't engage with life like that.
That's tough.
So my biological mother, when I told her about what happened, her face dropped and she turned to a ghostly white. But she believed me, just intrinsically believed me. And she said, right, you're not staying in that apartment by yourself. You're going to come stay with me. We're going to get you help. That's when I entered the mental health facility. And my mother just surrounded me with all the support and action as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big deal to go from, I'm 19 and yes, this wild stuff has happened to me and this thing's going on, to, now I'm going to a mental health facility. Was there stigma about that? When did you realize it's probably a good idea that I go do this?
Well, yeah, no, I was on the verge of ending my life. I didn't want to be here anymore. I was a 19-year-old kid, obviously been falsely accused of rape. My daughter's been taken from me, and I'm coming to terms with the fact that what I went through was abuse. Yeah. It's a lot for a 19-year-old kid to take on. And I didn't want to be here anymore. And
and you identified that? You'd said that to your mum?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no,
that's good of her to recognise and take action like that.
Yeah. But it was actually the Sydney Clinic on Bronte Road just here. And we lived around the corner from it, and I was in. So on the Friday, I made a plan to end my life on the Monday, and I had a final big weekend, just drug-fueled, boozed up, everything. And the Sunday morning, I had this dream of my mother finding me on the floor. And then that's when I said, I really need help. And my mum upgraded the health insurance and got me in that evening.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was really fortunate and privileged to have access to that.
That's incredible.
It was very quick.
It's fantastic. And
I was in there for 2 months as well.
Right. And for some people, hearing the idea that I'm in a mental health facility might be a terrifying thing. For people that have never been, or someone in their life has been, what would you say? What are the things that happen when you go there?
Yeah, no, it was scary because, like you said, and I think most people would think it's scary because they think of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or some stigmatized, dramatized idea of
the Batman film where they're doing the Arkham thing.
Yeah, it's like Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
No, it's nothing like that. I had to ease into it, and really, I think I was scared because I was having to face all these feelings that I felt but didn't have the language for.
Right.
I just thought I was shamed. I thought I was not that confident. I thought I was just, not great. But going in there, you do two things in tandem. You have one-on-one sessions and you do group therapy.
Yeah.
And I think the one-on-one sessions was great to give me the language to be able to articulate what I've experienced, but also the group sessions were so good because, one, I created that sense of community with the other patients in there who were, just trying to overcome their adversity as well. But also it gave me a sense of perspective of that everyone, I'm not alone in this. And I think the one thing that sexual abuse does to you, Osher, is make you feel this immense sense of isolation. And you're the only person that's experiencing it, and as if there's no hope for you whatsoever. And perpetrators instill that belief in victims. And I felt that, and that group therapy was so profound for me personally because it just melted that stigma and that belief I had about myself away.
And I guess it almost gives you practice at saying it out loud.
Yeah, it does.
In front of other people.
It does,
and in a very protective environment because there's someone there who's able to jump in and go, Jeremy.
Yeah. But that's actually a brilliant point. I never thought about that till he's just said it. But it was like, how do I gauge telling people about this if it comes up?
Yeah. And because at first you think, I could never speak this.
Yeah.
And then you start saying small versions of it in those safer places.
Yeah.
And then over time you understand, okay, I can say that sentence and not explode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I can say a second sentence. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
And then over time you figure it out, and it's part of retelling
Yes.
our story.
Yeah.
And because our brain wants to find, well, what did that mean? We're just trying to make sense of stuff, right?
Yeah.
The previous version of that your brain was trying to make sense of was very distorted and not okay. Criminal, horrible manipulation. As you retell your story, when your brain remembers that stuff, you go, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
And you're able
exactly.
to have a different relationship to that thing. Our brains are fascinating.
Yeah.
You talk about reclaiming a narrative. Now, for people who perhaps aren't going to go into an inpatient facility,
Yes.
you talk about writing an unsent letter
Yeah.
as a tool one may use. Now, talk to me about the tool of the unsent letter and how that can be useful.
Yeah. It was a therapeutic practice that I learnt in the facility. And, you know, there's an abundance of research into it as well about how helpful it is. The unsent letter thing is about just putting words to something and not expecting a response, just having that sort of unfiltered opportunity to get out of your system what needs to be poured out, I guess. And I remember writing a letter addressed to my stepmother and my father. Now, I wasn't allowed to put that exact letter in the book because there was a whole lot of legality and stuff that I probably couldn't put in there, and the publishers were apprehensive about including. But it sort of presented this opportunity for me to say, well, I was going to put my letter in here, but I couldn't. But maybe it was never about my letter. It's about the readers.
Yeah.
And you're right. The one thing that kills conversation and healing in community is that comparison of trauma. I've sat in rooms, so many rooms where people have gone through something, let's say an awful breakup, but they feel like they can't speak to me about it because it's nowhere near as bad as what I went through. That kills constructive sort of healing and collective healing as well. It's all relative. It's all matters to us. And what we've been through, it is personal, and we have to overcome it and acknowledge that this was harmful and it hurt to go through. And I think healing through unsent letters is a really great tool for anyone who wants to unpack that hurt. And, you know, you're just putting it down on paper. You're not sending it to anyone. So you don't get that sort of apprehension of fear that you're going to get, you know, an awful response. My letter's still in my drawer at home. Right. I read it now and again.
Say if somebody wants to try this out, how does it work?
Well, you just sit down and you just carve out some time for yourself, and you just pour your heart out. I mean, you have to be at a point where you're there. And I think, you know, speaking on the mental health facility, another idea that people think about or a notion that is preconceived is that people assume that you go to the mental health facility to get fixed, to be healed. You'll come out the other end, all sweet. Yep, went through that, all good. But the mental health facility is about, or engaging with, you know, therapy more broadly, is about acquiring the tools to not reach a point of healing, but to acquire the tools to manage the trauma. And I'm acutely aware of the fact that this is something I'll live with for the rest of my life. But I gain those tools to be able to manage that trauma, and when triggers arise, whether it be, you know, Bella and I have a baby on the way this year.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so like...
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, you know, my first daughter, and, you know, fatherhood was corrupted for me the first time around. A lot of triggers have come up as of late, and I'm working through that with, you know, a therapist and my support network at the time, whether it's things that happen in our relationship dynamic. So the healing through unsent letters is... and I do it regularly, and it's just a way to write out your pain and what you're feeling, and just get it off your chest, because the worst thing you can do, as you would know, is bottle things up.
So is the format like to whoever when you
when you did this to me, you made me feel, but also I just swore at my stepmother and mine. Yeah, I just said, you're fucking,
of course.
Like, you've ruined my fucking life.
Yeah, of course. I've got all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and this is, and and it's the...
and it's brilliant because it's personal, and you're not going to be judged for it in any way.
But it's, we're simple creatures sometimes, because then part of our brain goes, well, that's done.
Yeah.
And it stops ruminating on it. It's go, no, I've done that thing.
Yeah.
I've told that person that thing.
Yeah.
There's a form of therapy I did called trauma therapy called Hakomi therapy. It's very physical.
Right.
And the therapist had me shed a Swiss ball in the office, but it wasn't to sit on and it wasn't to do workouts on. It was to squeeze between my knees while I drove my thumbs into it, imagining they were the eyeballs of the person we were talking about.
Yeah, there you go. Wow.
All right. And then when we were done, I was like, oh, it feels a lot better. She goes, yeah. And it was fascinating.
Yeah,
that
wow.
Your brain's just trying to, we meant to do this thing, whether it was to run or something like that. There's something our brain wants to close loops.
Yeah.
You know? And I found that really interesting. And the letters thing kind of plays into that.
We do want to put bookends to things.
Yeah.
I think as humans, we have a natural sort of instinct to want to organize things and put things in a box and make it neat and understandable for us to completely fathom. A lot of us don't like loose ends.
Well, no, we make meaning out of patterns in our world.
We make meaning out of absolutely everything.
And when the pattern hasn't ended or there's no predictable end to the pattern, it's a bother for us.
Yeah.
That's why we
Because things we don't understand, we fear.
Yeah.
And that's
it's kept
child
us alive.
sexual abuse. But there's issues that we don't understand and we fear them. And that's why we turn a blind eye to them.
Yeah. If it's too much, we can't handle it. But thanks for talking about that because that's quite useful. Between getting out of the facility, I mean, how does the first kind of forays into dating
go? That's just so complex. There? It's just not a natural sort of thing for me. It was completely corrupted. And that's something that child sexual abuse specifically, when it's occurring through those formative years, it corrupts so many facets of your life. And dating's just one of those facets. I mean, I couldn't go on a first date and they're like, what do you do for work? Oh, I'm an advocate. I'm trying to change a law at the moment. Oh, what law? This law. And what do you do that for? Oh, I have lived experience. And it's just this can of worms that is not very sexy for a first date or anything like that.
This is not what I swiped for. I liked your photo.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, when do we get to root? Like, well, stop talking. That happened to me. Sorry, I understand. Because that happened to me. It was years ago when I was first on Tinder and I was like only ever like 6 months or so. It was like, oh, I thought we were doing the talking thing. Yeah. No, you're just here for, yeah. Okay. I actually wanted conversation by that point in my life.
I didn't even have the exactly. I didn't even have like the gauge to be able to pick up on those clues.
Yeah, right.
Like that. It was so foreign to me.
For people who've suffered child sexual abuse, people who've been victims of child sexual abuse, what are some ways it can affect their adult life when it comes to intimacy, particularly with things like enjoyment of pleasure or even feeling touch?
Well, I can speak for me personally, and, like that was a real barrier for me. I mean, child sexual abuse, you're essentially like when you come to a point in your adult life where you are meeting people and you are practicing intimacy, you have to overcome that initial hurdle of there are some scenarios that do sort of replicate your abuse, not in terms of it being abusive or like abhorrent, but just the dynamic of certain things. And I had to undo a lot of triggers around that as well. Like it's really difficult to engage with after experiencing child sexual abuse. I think a lot of it for me was about building that trust beforehand in conversing with my partner. And when I eventually met Bella, after years of shitty dating, I think it was great because Belle followed me online and knew exactly who I was and what I was about. So that like brick wall was already it was destabilized from the outset. So she knew exactly who I was. But even in sort of engaging with intimacy and stuff, it was just very sort of gradual and calm and it was nice. Yeah. And it was like we were both playing sort of like a team sport, I guess. But abuse, it doesn't have that dynamic at all. No. It's power, and you can, but it's difficult because as a victim survivor, my brain was telling me that something that could be quite nice and quite honest is not okay for me. So you do get that sort of, you get stifled by it. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of, I haven't done any specific research into it, but I'm sure there's a lot of psychological evidence that speaks to why survivors go down that path and stuff like that. But my experience has been it's always been tough. Yeah, but it's
as you mentioned, like you've gone not only the mental health facility but ongoing treatment and ongoing talk therapy. Life can be very different, and you can reclaim the joy and the light and the butterflies in your tummy. And it's something I would really want people to know. Like for people who perhaps have shut this away, and understandably shut this away and never dealt with it, what are we doing to ourselves if we don't deal with an abuse that happened, a sexual abuse that happened when we were a kid?
Oh, we're eating away at ourselves. We're not acknowledging truth. We're essentially burying our head in the sands and living a lie. I mean, like, I remember when I was in the mental health facility, Osher, I was 19, 20 at the time. And part of the reason that I wanted to engage with getting help was because I would see specifically men in the media, in their 50s and 60s, talking about things they experienced at the hands of at the Catholic Church. And they were like, yeah, I've had, 4 kids since, and I haven't unpacked this at all. And like, I don't really have a relationship with my kids anymore because I just didn't deal with stuff. And I was like, far out. I have empathy for these men because there was so much stigma around talking about it. And everyone has their own timeline of healing and stuff like that. But I don't know what it was within me, but I just had this foresight to be like, I don't want to be dealing with this when I'm 50, 60. Yeah. I just wanted to get a head start on it, I guess. And I think those challenges that those men that I was seeing in the media were facing, that really scared me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The systemic, like there's the family systems that protect perpetrators and keep victims from getting help, and that's the silence that starts when the abuse starts. So like, don't tell anyone, this is our secret. The stuff we see in the after-school specials, all the videos they make us watch in PE. But then there's also the rest of the legal system in some ways, the policing system around victims and around things like this. When did you start to identify that there was a systemic change that needed to happen within the legal system around childhood sexual abuse?
Yeah. Well, my mother was subjected to domestic violence at the hands of my father. That went to court. And in sentencing, my father tendered good character references. If we split the court process into 2 parts, you've got the trial and then the sentencing. So an accused perpetrator will go through the trial process, the facts will be established, and then the judge will come to a verdict, whether it be guilty or not guilty. If that offender is found guilty, they'll come back for sentencing, where the judge will essentially tell them how long they'll spend in prison or whether they'll do community service or whatever. During that sentencing process, so post-conviction, offenders can tender good character references, which are essentially letters attesting to their good nature. They're a great father, they've got a heart of gold. I actually go to courts and support victim survivors of child sexual abuse during the sentencing because they're aware of my advocacy work. And I went to one last year or the year before where a convicted child sex offender, 43 offences against 11 children over a period of years, had a letter written on his behalf attesting that he was a champion of young people. Now, for the victims and their families to sit in that courtroom and hear that, not only it's offensive and disheartening and dehumanising, but it's just a complete misnomer. And these references give offenders a discount on their sentence. And essentially, we're giving these convicted offenders a discount on the very thing that enabled them to facilitate the crime. And whilst, what my mother experienced was domestic violence, it's a similar sort of thing. People who perpetrate domestic violence will have this outward good standing in the community, be great people. And because of that experience, my mother faced firsthand and reference by reference as they were read aloud in support of my father, I just saw my mother's face drain of hope. She was up against a system that was just unbeatable, that wouldn't believe her. And when I started speaking publicly about my story and the abuse I endured after being in the mental health facility, that injustice stuck with me for so many years. I knew it was wrong. It was a complete misnomer. How can anyone who commits a violent crime be lauded as a good person? So, yeah, in 2022, I met Jared Grice, who was a fellow victim survivor. He reached out to me and we launched the Your Reference Ain't Relevant campaign. And after 4 years of hard work, that has resulted in legislative change across 4 jurisdictions in Australia with the complete abolition of good character references for all offences.
Wow. And it kind of blows my mind that in the discovery process that happens before a trial and then during the trial when evidence is like these are the agreed facts of reality, and both prosecution and defense get to agree on where that reality is and go, okay, well, we don't want this, but we'll agree on that. And and everyone goes, okay, now, and this is where we'll make our decision from. That then afterwards you can have something that neither the defense nor prosecution, like the defense has nothing to do with.
Yeah.
But like how that can possibly be relevant is astounding.
It's completely irrelevant. And yeah, it is unequivocal that the offender has been found guilty of this crime. The facts that you were mentioning there have been established. So to come back in sentencing when the victims are sitting there and for a domestic violence perpetrator to be lauded as a pillar of the community, it's fucking offensive.
Yeah, but it's also possibly dangerous because it's like this person has a chance, if it's, they may perhaps go to some correctional facility, go away, and there's treatment in there. You can choose to engage with it and come out a very different person, or you can come out a worse person. But it at very least gives a victim of 4 years, a couple of years where this person's
respite,
not around. I'm not going to guess they're going to be sitting outside my work.
Yeah.
Versus, well, time served, good behaviour, 3 years, off you pop.
Yeah. And the other thing, Osher, that was so important about this campaign that Jared and I established from the outset, it was that this was not only a legal reform to be done on paper. We didn't want to cross out a term and it be, just this legal thing that no one really understands. But it was an opportunity for us to go to the media and present a cultural reform as well as a legislative reform. And the cultural reform was why, when we're confronted with the devastating harm, whether it be child sexual abuse, rape, or domestic violence, very difficult things that people don't like to engage in conversation with, but why is it that we reach for language to soften that?
Yeah.
Why do we say, oh yeah, he was a good person? That couldn't have happened. I never knew that. Well, it's because we want to turn a blind eye. And now that the courts don't have, they're not allowed to introduce those subjective terms. It's completely objective now. Because media has to, can report within the confines of the law, they can't say those things anymore because it's not going to be passed on. And therefore, it'll teach, the wider community that if you're a sex offender, you're not a legend or an amazing guy.
So you mentioned 4 jurisdictions across Australia. What does that mean? There's work to be done?
Yes. So we've passed the law in New South Wales. New South Wales introduced the full abolition of character references for all crimes. The ACT introduced the abolition of good character references for child sexual abuse only, so they adopted our original campaign ask. Tasmania has done it for violent crimes, so lesser crimes like shoplifting, for example, they might be able to tender a good character reference, but more serious ones aren't. And Victoria is following New South Wales with introducing legislation in the middle of this year. Our campaign was an agenda item on the Standing Council of Attorneys General's meeting, where all the AGs from every jurisdiction in Australia, including federally and New Zealand's Justice Minister, they meet every quarter to discuss national consistency when it comes to law reform. And our campaign was an agenda item on that. So everyone's aware of it. All the Attorneys Generals are aware of the work, and we've met with them personally. WA is very interested. South Australia is on the cusp of, I think, we're having very good conversations there. Northern Territory and Queensland are monitoring it. It's a bit more difficult, but we'll get there.
What kind of difficulties? I'm interested to know, as a Queenslander.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know what's their reason for not taking the meeting or, not wanting to act.
No, we've had the meeting. I think they just want to monitor it because the whole thing is the bar associations and the law societies and all that. They're obviously kicking up a stink because they don't want an established mitigating factor that has been around, since the inception of the justice system to be taken from them. So I think there's just, let's see how it plays out in the other jurisdictions before we act. But those conversations are ongoing and they're positive, but it'll just take a little bit more time. But from the outset of launching this campaign, I've always said that New South Wales was a pilot, and I'll keep fighting until it's established in every corner of Australia.
Have any cases been sentenced since this law changed, and how has that affected the sentencing?
No, in New South Wales, the law has only been introduced a few weeks ago. So it takes time for the law books to be updated, for judges to be trained and to be to put this out into practice. It's about a 3 to 6 months.
What does advocacy look like in this space? Is it you sitting down with, because I've occasionally come across retired judges who happen to be the smartest, most incredible, hilarious, beyond wise people. Oh, thank goodness you're doing this job, because my God, the way you think about the world, the way these people think about the world is astounding. And they have, you think cops see some bad shit. Judges have seen every fucking thing all day, like all the evidence. They don't see anything redacted. They don't see press releases. They don't see a quick executive summaries. They hear and see all of it face to face with victims all day long. And yet they still seem to be these really wise, incredible people. Tell me about some of the conversations you've had with judges or people of that standing around this idea.
Yeah, well, actually, one of my favourite people that I've ever met throughout my advocacy journey is Justice Peter McClellan. And he was the gentleman who actually introduced the law that I wanted to reform. So essentially I went to him saying, oh, you introduced this and it hasn't done the right thing. I want to change it.
Was he still working? Was he still sitting?
Yeah, so he was, sorry, I should have said before, but he was the lead commissioner for the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse in 2017. And so that was introduced by Julia Gillard, and they did their research and they came back with a report in 2017. Justice Peter McClellan, he's no longer a judge, but he runs the New South Wales Sentencing Council. And essentially we had a meeting with him and we said, yeah, look, this recommendation you made with the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses, the law, it only prohibits convicted child sex offenders in institutional settings from using character references, but individuals like my stepmother and my campaign partner Jared was sexually abused by his neighbour, they could tender good character references. So we were trying to say, sir, you had the right intention, but it has to go broader. And we had that conversation with him, and he was so empathetic and understanding. And he has a really, actually quite a famous quote that he said when he was delivering the final report for the Royal Commission. And I don't have the exact language in my head, but it was to the effect of, like, he had no idea how devastating child sexual abuse was until he heard the recounts of the victims that testified to that Royal Commission. He would see things on paper and he would, during his time as a judge, but it wasn't until he was in that room with victims and survivors speaking about that pain and the devastation of it that he realised the full extent of the issue that's facing Australia.
It's not a small issue either, as we discussed earlier. And
28.5% of the population. That's from a 2023 study. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will experience child sexual abuse in Australia before their 18th birthday. Out of an average class of 30 kids, it's about 8 kids.
So that's just over 6 of those kids will suffer child sexual abuse from somebody that they know, somebody that their parents know, someone that is close to them, someone who's been identified as a person of trust.
Yeah.
That's a conversation we absolutely have to have. What are some things that we can do as parents, as carers, as mates of guys in our lives?
Yeah.
What are some things we can do, and how can we play a role in getting that number down?
Oh, look, we all have the power to influence. We all have far more influence than we ever give ourselves credit for. I think it's one thing to say what can parents do, but it has to work in tandem with policy at a systemic level as well. I think if our institutions and our justice system, more specifically, doesn't present the standard that is required when faced with these issues, how can we expect the community to, and vice versa? So when we're confronted with this harm, like I was touching on before, it's so important that we get comfortable with the uncomfortable. and not let that shame feed into that shame. So much of what I experience could have been prevented if the adults in my life didn't feed into their shame and they acknowledged it and had that conversation with me and listened and picked up on the signs. My area of expertise comes to law reform and using my experience to incite political change and sort of legislative change. There's an abundance of research in preventative measures and how to parent and stuff like that, and I don't want to even pretend to be an expert because there's so many layers to it all. But
which I think you identified fairly clearly. Like just take a moment, even just listening to this right now, watching this right now, take a moment to be with the discomfort that you feel in your body to know that in a class of 30 kids, 6 of those kids will be sexually abused by somebody that they have been told or see as in a person who's close to them or in a position of trust. And that's going to be someone that you know.
Yeah.
And yes, that's uncomfortable. It's not to mean that you should be jumping at spiders, but just know that that's more likely to happen from there than them walking to school by themselves and worrying about a bloke in a van.
Yes.
Which is the lie. But I understand why we are reluctant to think about that, because then who's our friend?
Well, it corrupts our worldview.
Yes.
Yeah, and it tells us, to be cynical about everything.
Which is a very difficult way to go through life.
It's very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult.
It feels safe. I can tell. I've been there.
Yeah,
it feels real safe.
Yeah.
But you're barking at strangers.
Yeah,
and life is pretty lonely.
Yeah. So it's true, but it's that balancing act, and I think when you have a gut feeling, acting on it, like we were saying here, I think it's really, and it's difficult, and I don't want to pretend it's not difficult to come to terms with, like I was saying before, that person you spent Christmas dinners with and sat at the cafe with and see on your walk
possibly
to
know since you were a kid.
I think a good rule of thumb is to not go around accusing everyone of being this awful thing, but not being surprised or being dismissive when evidence is presented to you.
Right.
Yeah. It's so easy for us to point the finger at institutions because there's a level of separation. But when you tell people to reflect on what's happening inside their homes or the possibility of what could be happening inside their homes, you can't legislate that reflection. You can't. It is incumbent upon us to be able to do that hard work.
Yeah.
And we all have a responsibility to do it.
We do.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know, man, I'm trying to think about it. When I talk about mental health, I try to draw analogies on vehicles for some reason. It's always vehicles. Like if you blew your front tire while driving your family to the Gold Coast and you're just on one rim, you'd pull over.
Yeah.
Because you're doing 100 and you don't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
But if you're starting to experience episodes of terrible mental ill health and you don't seek help, that's you keeping driving. Like you can't fix the car while you're driving. Yeah.
You got to pull over. You got to
you can't fix this from the inside. So that these things can happen under anybody's noses, and it's not your fault if you missed it. But what you can do is something about it.
Yeah.
You can't go through your life punishing yourself for having made a mistake or missed something that you didn't even know to look for.
Yeah. And you know what? A fantastic example of that in my experience is my biological mother. She missed a lot. She feels that parental guilt, like she missed a lot, and she still struggles and unpacks that to this day. But when she was presented with it, she took action.
Right.
She took me in. She said, "You're not staying at that house by yourself. You're going to be with me. We're going to get you the help. But don't worry about your father. I'm going to deal with your father. You just worry about you."
Yeah, wow.
That is that practicality, that initial belief in the heat of the moment. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. I believe you.
Yeah.
That sent me on a trajectory where I could go and get help, and I can be in a state of reflection like I am today and use it to help other people. So I would not be the person I am today without my mother.
To reflect on, I guess from her perspective, I'm just trying to think from her perspective, that is something to, when the thoughts come visiting, get to remind yourself, that's what I didn't do. I can't change. This is what I did do. Yeah. This is what I did do. And then I was, as the best I could, I showed up as best.
And now she can say, my son wrote a book and changed the law. And she's quite proud of that.
Because the idea, so the book's called Transform Your Pain into Purpose. As I mentioned at the start, it's, yes, you can't change this thing, but you can see it as something that's happened for you. You can use it as a catalyst to create something out of your life that otherwise was never going to happen. There's a line you wrote in the book that I really liked. It's that if all you ever do with your pain is make sure it ends with you, then you've changed the world in one of the most important ways there is. Can you talk to me about that, particularly speaking to people who, as we mentioned, may have had an experience in their lives, but they haven't sought treatment for. Can you talk a little bit about why that is important and seeking treatment is important in reference to what you've written here?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I reached a point, Osher, when I was in that facility and I got, with that foresight and reading those articles about the men in their 60s talking about abuse for the first time, I came to the understanding that what happened to me was not my fault in any way, shape or form, but it is my responsibility to do something with it. And I think having that sense of purpose, it's how I defined that purpose. And it gave me, it actually allowed me to take something that was so horrific and awful and just, I was able to regain a sense of autonomy after so much of my autonomy was taken from me.
Yeah.
And to have that sort of actionable approach to it, for me, like I'm very like step 1, step 2, step 3. I'm very sort of in that, that's how I operate. And yeah, this was just seemed like the logical end result for me. But purpose is totally definable to the individual.
Yeah.
And I think as a victim survivor, I'm constantly in this state, and an advocate, I'm constantly in this state of turmoil because speaking out, whilst it is a good thing, and, you know, coming on wonderful podcasts like this and being in magazine articles and writing the book and changing laws, that is not what surviving is. Advocacy, it's not a magazine cover. There's a lot of really hard work that has allowed me to arrive at this point. And essentially, I advocate so victim survivors can live a prosperous and wonderful life after experiencing a lot of harm. And if I don't get to a point where I start prioritizing my own life, then I'm being disingenuous in I'm not practicing what I preach, essentially. Yeah. And I think I've arrived at a point in my life now where, you know, I have this wonderful fiance. We're going to get married soon. We've got a baby on the way. It's a second chance of fatherhood for me. You know, I'm sort of seeing the legislation come into effect and changing the lives of people in practical ways, and that fills me with so much bliss and happiness that I've turned that pain into something great. But I just want victim survivors or anyone has experienced adversity that's listening to this to understand that you don't have to be doing that in order to be deemed worthy. You are worthy purely because of your humanity and the fact that you've gone through this horrendous thing and are choosing to ensure you're choosing that trauma ends with you and you're not passing it on.
And that's the incredible thing, I think, maybe the last 20, 30 years, really, as parents and as, you know, advocates like yourself, and also as psychological practices evolve, the ability to really quite effectively help someone live free of that kind of stuff. Whereas in the past, who would hit their kids? People who were hit when they were kids. Who would abuse people sexually? People who were abused sexually. Brains are weird.
That intergenerational trauma.
Yeah, that's
weird. What it is. And look, I'm also acutely aware that the abuse I experienced, it didn't begin with just me.
Yeah.
It happened generations before me.
Right.
It was passed on, and traumatized people put their trauma onto me. And I just so happened to be the first one out of a long line of, you know, intergenerational trauma to stand up and say enough. And that's really difficult. But when you're there, it is a profound moment, and it changes the trajectory of not only your life, but your children's lives. And that,
it's probably the most quoted film. You know, if it's not automotive, it's also Matrix for me.
Yeah.
But you're Keanu stopping the bullets in the air.
Yeah.
You're like, no. This is it from here. Thank you very much. The bullets fall to the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to carry on.
I just can't do the flip.
Well, there's always
my back's killing me.
But no, but
you're 100% right.
Because, you know, I mentioned before the idea that, if someone finds out their kid is, you know, abused by somebody, and then dad goes over there and knocks his fucking lights out or hurts the person terribly, well, then now both guys are in prison. You know, it doesn't serve anybody.
No,
it's shit, and we all have the choice to go, this is awful, And I can probably do something better with it than have this eat me inside or destroy my relationship and life around me.
Yep.
And thankfully, there's support and help to have people do that. And but we don't know it can happen if we don't read the story. Yeah. And so thank you for sharing your story, Harrison.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And look, we're in a world, I think, politically and socially where we do feel this sense of pessimism towards a lot of things. But
it's easy. Pessimism's easy.
It's easy. But hope is so important to hold on to. And, you know, I think it sounds corny, but holding on to that sense of optimism, it's not something that is just gifted to you. It's something you actually have to work at.
Yeah.
And you have to chip away through all that noise and all that rubbish and not fall victim to the world of pessimism. Whilst it is easy, like you said, it's a hard thing to dig yourself out of once you're down there deep. But if you can truck along and retain that sense of optimism, it's a beautiful thing. And it's like dominoes, like it feeds off people.
Yep. Absolutely. Thanks for coming in, man.
Thanks, Osher.
No worries, brother. Really appreciate that.